Grace unto you and peace from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome to an Orion Bible Study. In this Bible study, we're going to look at creation and the biblical God equation. Now, I have prayed to God that He would reveal the answer to the God equation to me before He returns. And by His grace and mercy, He has revealed it to me through the scriptures, and it's really so simple. And I wrote a science paper on this and published it. I'll leave the link in the description. This video is based on that paper, so reference that paper to this video. Now, in physics, scientists have been searching for an answer to the God equation that unifies general relativity, E equals mc squared, with quantum gravity. There's a missing variable in the equation for general relativity. It's E equals mc squared and something else. There's something missing because according to E equals mc squared, the smallest unit of measurement is the Planck scale. And below the Planck scale, physics breaks down. When we try to measure below the Planck scale, it becomes a black hole. And so light does not work below the Planck scale according to E equals mc squared. And so there's a missing variable that needs to be discovered in order for us to understand what happens inside of a black hole, because a black hole collapses to a singularity, which enters below Planck scale values. With the God equation, we can define what is inside of a black hole because we can measure below the Planck scale. Without understanding what happens below the Planck scale, we cannot determine what is inside of a black hole. I have prayed to God for an answer to the God equation, and by His grace and mercy, He has revealed it to me. And He didn't have to. He did not have to reveal to us the God equation. Physicists and scientists are so caught up in trying to disprove God, they reject Him. The answer to the God equation has been in the Holy Bible this whole time. And it's so simple. And the only reason that physicists cannot find an answer, the scientific answer to the God equation, is because they deny the scriptures. They reject God. They reject the Creator. But by God's grace and mercy, He has revealed to me, a humble fatherless orphan, what the God equation is. And so I'm going to share that with you today in this video. The first verse I want to look at is Genesis 1, verse 1 to 2. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now, we need to understand that light, God did not create light until verse 3. So, there's something here when light does not exist. And that's the answer to the God equation. Now let's compare this scripture to Jeremiah 4, verse 23. Jeremiah 4, verse 23. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. Do you realize what that means? Do you realize how profound that answer is? The heavens had no light. They had no light. Do you realize what that means? That is the answer to the God equation right there. And I'll explain how. So, without light, without the speed of light, there is no space-time curvature. There is no curvature of space-time. And without the curvature of space-time, there is no gravity and there is no mass. So God is telling us here that He created the heavens and the earth, and there was no mass, no gravity, no time. There was no speed of light. There was no gravity, no time. So when we take E equals mc squared, right before God created light here, there's no light. So C equals 0. And we all learn in elementary school that when you multiply by 0, you get 0. So M multiplied by 0 equals 0. So right here God is telling us according to our physics, when God created the heaven and the earth, E equaled 0. There was so there's something here that's missing from the equation when E equals 0. So whatever's happening below the Planck scale, in our physics, it has something to do with this first instance of creation here. There's a property of the universe here that is missing from Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, because there's no light. So C equals 0. So what is this property that God made? When he made the heavens and the earth and they were without form and void, what is that property of the universe there where C equals 0? This is the extra variable in the God equation that we need to understand. So let's go back to Genesis 1. So in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So this formless and void property here, there's no mass, there's no gravity, there's no matter of any kind, because without mass you cannot have matter. So the earth and the waters here are not made out of matter. That doesn't happen until there's light, because without the speed of light you cannot have matter. So whatever this property of the universe is, it's making up the earth and water without matter. So there's a property here that's not defined by E equals mc squared. And when we analyze this property that has no light, we can understand simply it's a motionless structure. There's no motion. There's no movement at all. The waters are completely still. The earth and the heavens here are like a still frame. That's all they are, is a still frame. There's no waves. It's a still frame. Whatever this property is, it does not move. It has no motion because the light does not exist. There's no movement of this property. As I, the discoverer of this, I have chosen to name this property foundation, and I express it as a cross in parentheses. Simply, it's a formless and void property of the universe that exists where there's no time, there's no light, there's no matter, there's no gravity, there's nothing, because light does not exist. Light is the backbone of all those things. All energy that is converted by E equals mc squared, all energy is based on light. It's based on the speed of light. And so here we have no light. So this property is foundation. And that's exactly what this is. This is the foundation of the universe that God laid for time and matter to sit up on top of. So when God, in verse 3 here, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That is E equals mc squared added to this property of the universe. So E equals mc squared did not come into the equation until after this formless and void structure was made. So E equals mc squared is added to this, which is foundation. I have called this foundation. So we have, once God created light, this is where the CMB formed. Everything the scientists are calling the CMB, that the CMB came into existence when God created light. That's God creating light, matter, and energy. And then that's when God put all the atoms together. He did this on the first day. God created the CMB. So when God said, "Let there be light," he covered foundation with light. He completely covered foundation with light. And that's what the CMB is. And he expanded that with dark energy. And we still see the dark energy expanding today. We see as the universe is continuing to expand. But on the first day here, God created dark energy to expand the light he placed over foundation, over this formless and void structure, this motionless structure of the earth and the heavens. God placed on top of that light, matter, and energy. I explained it more in depthly in my science paper, if you want to read that. In my science paper, I explain everything in depthly, so it's easy for anyone to follow. If you want to learn more about the CMB, I put it in beautiful words in my essay. So right here, God created light. E equals mc squared is added to foundation here. So when a black hole collapses to the Planck scale, it touches foundation when it collapses to the Planck scale, and it does not continue. It touches this formless and void structure or property that God made for light to sit on top of. And that's simply it. See, foundation is what exists under E equals mc squared. As a black hole collapses, it touches foundation, and this foundation, light does not exist. There's no motion. So it's a property of the universe that God designed that nothing can move through. There's no motion. So it holds the motion of our reality together. That's what foundation does. This property of the universe was laid to hold the motion of our universe together. So it's basically the lines of creation, and the color, if you will, the color is the motion of reality that God colored in between the lines. And so that color, it can come up against the lines, but it cannot pass through them. Those lines are the Planck scale. The lines are the Planck scale, and the color of the masterpiece is the motion of reality. That's E equals mc squared. So the motion of our reality cannot pass through foundation. So when a black hole collapses, it reaches the Planck scale, and below the Planck scale, that's a limit that the collapse cannot exceed. So the collapse of a black hole cannot pass through foundation. It collapses, it cannot pass through foundation. The formless and void, this formless and void property of the universe, it keeps a black hole from collapsing indefinitely. So wherever E equals mc squared is defined, this property of the universe equals 0. But wherever this property of the universe is defined, wherever E equals mc squared equals 0, this property is defined. Foundation does not interfere with everyday physics, because foundation equals 0 wherever E equals mc squared is defined. We enter into this formless and void motionless property of the universe wherever E equals mc squared is undefined. So when we go below the Planck scale, we enter into this formless and void property of the universe. And that is the God equation. It's just E equals mc squared plus this formless and void property. And so whenever we measure the collapse of a black hole, we don't keep going below the Planck scale. We touch foundation. We touch the foundation of the universe that God designed when he created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. There was no light. There was no light, as it says in Jeremiah 4 verse 23. There was no light here. There's no light because the speed of light is not designed to exist in this formless and void property. So this formless and void property is added to E equals mc squared. These are two different terms. So this formless and void property is a separate physics from E equals mc squared. It's a separate physics in that it's just a three-dimensional foundation that God made so that nothing can pass through it. So when God was getting ready to design the black holes, when he said let there be light, this is when God created black holes. So before he created black holes, he created foundation for black holes to sit on top of, to not collapse into. So black holes would collapse. But God engineered the foundation of the universe as this formless and void property. God engineered that first. He laid that first. He laid the foundation of the universe as a motionless property and then created light and all the motion of our reality to sit on top of foundation. So whenever a black hole would collapse, it would not continue. It would stop at foundation. And see, when we measure the core of a black hole, it collapses to the Planck scale, and in our God equation, it stops. The core stabilizes there because it cannot collapse further. At the Planck scale, a black hole stabilizes. That's where a black hole stabilizes. So right here where God said, let there be light, on this first day, this is the CMB. God created the CMB here on the first day. God formed the CMB. He put atoms and molecules together. He structured all atoms in the universe and put them together here on the first day. And this is what the CMB is. Remember, the water upon the earth was motionless. The water upon the earth was motionless because it was not yet made out of atoms. That water was made out of foundation. So it was simply the foundation that God laid for the water to exist in, on top of. And so when God said, let there be light, that's when he structured atoms and water molecules and all the motion of our reality. Electrons began to spin around their nucleuses as God created and structured atoms together. The moment he created light here, it was plasma and light, photons. It was photon plasma. So that's what formed the CMB. On the first day of creation, God covered foundation with photon plasma and used dark energy to expand that so that it completely covered foundation. He expanded that light to give the sun contrast in space. If God did not expand that light as what we see in the CMB today, then it would outshine the sun. The entire universe was covered in light. It was covered with light at this moment when God said, let there be light. Boom. The entire, this formless and void foundation was covered with light. And so God instantly expanded that though. He expanded that light to give the sun contrast in space. He redshifted that light with dark energy. And he did that extremely fast. See, God expanded this light faster than dark energy expands space today. But the entire universe was covered in light. That's what scientists call the Big Bang. But he covered the entire heavens and earth with light. And he expanded that to give the sun contrast in space. So that's what the CMB is. That's what we see in the CMB. But it did not happen over millions of years or billions of years. This happened in one day. God did this in one day. And so how he did that, we can't understand because he's an infinite God. We cannot understand how an infinite God can just create light like this, a whole universe. I mean, there's no way we can understand how an infinite God can create a whole universe just by speaking. But this is what God did on the first day. God filled the heavens and the earth that he created beforehand as formless and void, and God covered it with light and expanded that light, redshifted that light to give the sun contrast in space. So the light is still there, it's just expanded to where the human eye can't see it. It's microwaves. So God divided that light from the darkness. He put the earth in orbit around the sun at this time. And so that's when the evening and morning are the first day. God put the earth around the sun here, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So when God created light, he created the sun, he created all atoms in the universe, he created all motion and movement. God designed everything defined by E equals mc squared here. When God said, let there be light, God created E equals mc squared. God added mc squared to the formless and void foundation variable. That's what God did. And so God created the sun there, and he put the earth in orbit around the sun. And he did this in one day. Whether it was an hour or 12 hours, we don't know. But God did all this in one day. And so the evening and morning were the first day. God put the earth in orbit around the sun, and he created day and night. God designed the earth's 24-hour rotation, and that's what made the first evening morning. You see, in the beginning here, when God created the heaven and the earth, this is when scientists think the Big Bang happened. But no. What scientists refer to as the Big Bang is when God created light. So they're entirely overlooking the foundation God created, light to sit on top of. And so by not understanding that God created a totally separate property of the universe before he created light, before their Big Bang and CMB began, they say, oh, well, to ask the question, what happened before the Big Bang, is like to ask what's north of the North Pole. I mean, these scientists are so deluded by their Big Bang, they reject the Creator, and therefore they cannot understand that there was something before the Big Bang happened. See, the Big Bang happened when God said, let there be light. That's their Big Bang. That's their Big Bang. So they take something that is created, they take the things that are made, and they say, how long did this created thing take to evolve on its own from nothing? Well, let's try to figure it out. So if we just trace it back, if it naturally evolved on its own, it took about 13 billion years or so, and then we have nothing. It obviously came from nothing. I mean, this is totally delusional. It's totally delusional. You cannot have something from nothing. It's stupid. You cannot have something from nothing. And it's very clear, according to their Big Bang models, you have this singularity that became something. Well, what formed the singularity? See, they cannot answer how something can come from nothing, but the scriptures plainly tell us that there was something before their Big Bang. There was something before their Big Bang, and that's this formless and void property of the universe that God made. God made this formless and void property for E equals mc squared to sit on top of. And so when we understand that, then we can develop a theory of quantum gravity, and it's plainly simple. There's a separate physics below let there be light. There's a separate physics. There's a different physics that God made under E equals mc squared. There's an extra variable, and this variable simply equals 0 where E equals mc squared is defined. So whenever you measure something in the motion of our reality, this extra variable does not interfere because it equals 0. So it's always been there in Einstein's equations. It's just equaled 0 whenever Einstein did his math. And then whenever Einstein tried to determine what happens inside of a black hole, he simply went below his equation, E equals mc squared, and never ever discerned that God made a separate structure to sit underneath it, a motionless structure where light did not exist. So as light did not exist here, whenever Einstein measured his black hole, or whenever Einstein tried to calculate what happened inside of a black hole, he totally missed the formless and void property of the universe that God designed E equals mc squared to sit on top of. And so by doing that, these scientists are totally delusional by taking the things that are made and saying, well, to ask what was before the Big Bang is like to ask what's north of the North Pole. That's as far as you can go. Well, duh. That's as far as you can go, because that's when God created light to sit on top of the property of the universe, the formless and void property of the universe. So this is the answer to the God equation. It's simply E equals mc squared plus formless and void foundation. That's all the God equation is. It's so simple. But scientists say, no, we don't want the Bible. We don't want the Bible to tell us anything. We want to figure it out on our own. And you can't do that because you're studying something that God created. He lets you go to your Big Bang, but he's not going to give you anything else. You're not going to find anything else before you die. Before you die as an atheist physicist, you're not going to discover anything farther than that precedes your Big Bang, so long as you reject the scriptures. And what the scriptures say, that God created the heavens and the earth before he made the Big Bang. So there was 3D space before the Big Bang happened. And God filled that 3D space with the Big Bang. So the CMB is what blanketed foundation. God blanketed this formless and void property of the universe with E equals mc squared. And so E equals mc squared sits on top of that, and it cannot pass through it. God laid a perfectly motionless foundation for E equals mc squared, for the motion of our reality to sit on top of. And below that, below the motion of our reality at the Planck scale, nothing can move further because it's on top of foundation. So, without further ado, allow me to introduce you to my model. Now, I'm going to use this cotton ball later. So, this twine here, this twine that I made, is going to be the gravitational radius of the black hole. This is the gravitational radius where the black hole sits. This is essentially the body of the black hole. So in our math, the gravitational radius is where the black hole sits in space. Okay? And so inside of that, we have a core. We have a core. And before my discovery of foundation, this core essentially shrunk. This core shrunk to infinity small. Well, let me use this cotton ball first. So when this is a representation of Einstein's black hole. See, in Einstein's time, spinning black holes were not discovered yet. According to Einstein's math, when he studied black holes, they were static, so they did not spin. But now we know, since Einstein's time, we understand that black holes spin. At the center of our very own Milky Way galaxy, there is a supermassive black hole we call Sagittarius A. Okay, and it is spinning. But in Einstein's time, when Einstein studied his physics, he didn't know that black holes spun. So he studied static black holes. Those are non-spinning black holes. In the math of a non-spinning black hole, the event horizon, this black circle here, this represents the event horizon. So in a non-spinning black hole, this event horizon is twice the size of the gravitational radius. This twine here represents the gravitational radius where the black hole sits in space. And this event horizon is twice the size of that for a non-spinning black hole. And this singularity here in Einstein's math, it shrunk forever. It essentially shrunk forever. So it exceeded Planck density. In Einstein's math, the core center of a black hole shrunk infinity small and therefore became infinitely dense. And that's what scientists call a singularity. So it has infinite density, and it's infinity small. It's a point, it's a dot. Now, fast forward to our time, we understand that there is a ring in the center of every black hole because it's spinning. So there's a ring core. There's a ring core in the center of every black hole, and it's spinning. Prior to my discovery of foundation in the God equation, this ring core would shrink infinitely thin. So it wouldn't become a point, but this ring core itself would shrink infinity thin. Scientists call this a ringularity. But now with my God equation, the extra variable, the formless and void property of the universe, this ring core will shrink to the Planck length and stop because it cannot move through foundation. There's no motion in the formless and void foundation God laid for the motion of our reality to sit on top of. So a black hole collapses as a ring to the Planck length and stops. There it stabilizes. And so this is the gravitational radius. This is where the black hole sits in space. This is the event horizon. So beyond this event horizon, light cannot escape. But this is the gravitational radius of the black hole itself. This is where the black hole sits in 3D space. In space, the gravitational radius defines where the black hole sits in space. So to mathematically calculate our ring, we're going to use the equation that mathematically calculates or mathematically measures a torus, which is a ring, a donut. So a torus has two radiuses. It has a major radius and a minor radius. So the major radius is from the center of the ring to the ring itself. So the black thing is the ring tube. The second radius is the tube itself, the tube of the ring. So we have the major radius, which is from the center to the tube, and then the tube itself is the minor radius. So that's the thickness. The thickness of the ring is the minor radius, and from the center of the ring to the tube is the major radius. So we have to find those. And so our ring will always have a Planck length minor radius. The thickness of the tube of this ring will constantly stay at a Planck length. But as our black hole feeds, the ring will get bigger, but it will stay at Planck length minor radius. So the major radius will increase as our black hole grows, but the minor radius of the ring will stay at a Planck length. And so our God equation is applied by this ring will not shrink infinity thin. It will shrink to Planck length because it will press up against foundation. The foundation variable in our God equation, the formless and void property of the universe that God laid the motion of our reality to sit on top of, our ring will shrink to Planck length and then stop. It will stabilize at Planck length. The thickness of the ring cannot get thinner than Planck length because that's where it presses against foundation at. As our black hole feeds, the minor radius, the thickness of the ring will remain the same, but the ring itself will get bigger. So as our black hole feeds, the ring will get bigger, but the thickness of the ring will remain at the Planck length. So that's very important to understand. And so once we calculate the volume of our black hole, then we can use that to measure its density. Our physics cannot determine how fast a black hole spins. We cannot measure the angular momentum of a black hole. That's just something that we can't do. But in our math, we have developed a formula where we can measure the fastest possible angular momentum a black hole can spin. And then, of course, its slowest spin is non-spinning, so that would be 0. The black holes that Einstein studied are static. They are non-spinning. But in our math, the fastest a black hole can possibly spin is the speed of light. So a black hole cannot spin faster than the speed of light. Now, in between non-spinning and the speed of light, we have developed a formula to where we can just input digits to assume how fast a black hole is spinning, and we can do the math that way. So as we input those digits between 0 and 1, so where 1 is the speed of light and 0 is non-spinning. So in between 0 and 1, we can input digits to learn what the math tells us happens at that angular momentum. And when we do that, as I explained in my essay, as I explained in my science paper, I give you a solution of values. The faster the ring of a black hole spins, the event horizon shrinks against the gravitational radius. This is one of the things that is so fascinating, is that as the ring of the black hole approaches the speed of light, the event horizon will surface with the gravitational radius. And the core will also surface with the gravitational radius. But see, the core itself will not pass through the event horizon. So the event horizon will still be on the outside of the core. We will not be able to see the ring itself. We cannot see the ring itself, but it presses right up against the event horizon and gravitational radius. So as the black hole spins at the speed of light, the ring core will surface with the gravitational radius, and then the event horizon will surface with the gravitational radius. But the ring core will still be behind the event horizon, so it won't like come outside the event horizon. If a black hole is spinning at the speed of light, we still can't see the core, but it's literally just behind the event horizon, the core is. And so as a black hole slows down, the ring itself shrinks. The ring shrinks. So the ring gets smaller the slower the black hole goes. And then as that happens, the event horizon grows. It gets bigger. So the event horizon will get bigger as the ring slows, and then once the ring comes to a stop, it becomes a static black hole. These are the black holes that Einstein studied. These are black holes that do not spin. They have no spin. And there's a core, there's a ball. According to our God equation, there's a ball at the center, a ball core. It's a sphere core that does not exceed Planck density. On a non-static black hole, as the black hole feeds, the core gets bigger, the ball core gets bigger, but it doesn't exceed Planck density. So it'll get bigger, but it'll stay at Planck density. So it'll grow very slow because it has to remain Planck density. When something's added to it, anything that falls into the black hole becomes Planck dense. So it adds to the Planck density. So as it's consistently adding, it's getting bigger, but it's maintaining Planck density. And then if we analyze, if it begins to spin, it's not going to stay a ball. It becomes a ring. So it'll be a very small ring. It'll be a very small ring. If it's like if it's spinning slowly, it'll be a very small ring. But as the ring, as it spins faster, the ring will grow. The ring will get bigger. And it'll become less dense. So at the speed of light, the density is the density of the ring is very small. The density is very small. But as the black hole slows down and comes to a stop, it hits Planck density. So as long as a black hole is spinning, it cannot touch Planck density. But only when the black hole is static can it be Planck dense. Because that's when everything that falls in is just pressed against here. There's no motion inside of it. There's no spinning motion. It's just a static black hole. This is where the core is Planck dense. But as it begins to spin, it loses Planck density, but the ring keeps its Planck length size. And it begins to spin, and as it spins, the ring core begins to expand out to gravitational radius. As a spinning black hole feeds, the gravitational radius grows and the core itself gets bigger. if a black hole is spinning at the speed of light and something falls into the event horizon, it immediately combines with the core because it's spinning so fast. But see, if it's spinning half at the speed of light, then there's a space between the event horizon and the core. So a black hole spinning at half the speed of light will fall into the event horizon and then go into the gravitational radius and then combine with the core. So there will be space there. And then if a black hole stops spinning, it becomes a static black hole with a ball core. So if a black hole stops spinning, a static black hole becomes a ball core. And the event horizon is twice the gravitational radius of a non-spinning black hole. Say if God took a non-spinning black hole and began spinning it like this, then the core's geometry will change from a ball to a ring. And as it spins faster, the ring will expand out to the gravitational radius and the event horizon will shrink to the gravitational radius. So and then once it's spinning at the speed of light, as I said, the event horizon is pressed against the core. But the core is still not visible beyond the event horizon. So that's one of the most fascinating things about a spinning black hole and what our God equation tells us. But see, without our God equation, this ring will shrink to infinity. But no, see, our God equation says that the ring stays at Planck length. The tube of the ring, the thickness of the ring stays at Planck length. So if we do the math, the black hole at the center of our galaxy, the thickness of the ring core is Planck length, but it is hundreds of thousands of miles in diameter. So that's one of the fascinating things. A black hole ring can get bigger and bigger and bigger, hundreds of thousands of miles, but the thickness of the ring itself is Planck length. It's so small. It's so small, but it's so wide, and that's such fascinating engineering on behalf of our infinite God. God created all black holes. They did not form on their own, but when we look at the engineering of them, when we look at how God engineered black holes, when we use our God equation, the engineering of black holes is so infinitely marvelous. It's so perfect. This fulfills the verse. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Black holes are the mystery of God's creation, and he has only revealed it to us now through the God equation that he has revealed to me, and that I have shared with you. So as a black hole spins faster, the ring core loses its density, but as a black hole spins slower, it increases in density. And then finally, once it comes to a stop, it becomes Planck dense. So it reaches Planck density, and that's the maximum density that God designed the universe to exhibit. A static black hole is Planck dense. The core is Planck dense and grows while maintaining Planck density. But a spinning black hole, as this spins, it loses density. The ring thickness loses density, but it stays at Planck length. It stays at Planck length, but loses density and grows faster. As it gets faster, it expands towards the gravitational radius, and then its limit is beyond the speed of light. So it cannot exceed faster than the speed of light. A black hole can spin at the speed of light, but it cannot pass that. And that's just a fascinating observation that our God equation tells us. And so without foundation, we cannot define what a black hole does, because without the formless and void foundation that God gave us in the Bible, according to Einstein's physics, this ring will not maintain Planck thickness. It will get smaller than the Planck length and forever. And it'll shrink forever to infinity small, and it'll exceed Planck density and become infinitely dense. And that's what a singularity is, a ringularity. So our God equation tells us that inside of a black hole there's a core. And scientists have always suspected this, but they needed to develop a theory of quantum gravity that unifies with relativity. But scientists, they cannot do this without accepting there's a God. The reason why they'll never be able to is because they have to establish something that was before the Big Bang. And if they cannot establish something that was before the Big Bang, then they're not going to be able to find anything that will stabilize the core of a black hole. The only way the core of a black hole is stabilized is by understanding what the formless and void property of the universe is that God created before he made light. And that formless and void property is the secret to the God equation. When there's no light, and therefore without light, you have no gravity, you have no mass, you have no time, but you still have the heavens and the earth. God created the heavens and the earth, and they had no light. So the earth had zero mass. And you ask, how can God create the heavens and the earth and it have zero mass? Well, the answer is because that was foundation. That was a property of the universe that God put gravity and mass on top of. If God did not create foundation first, then he would have just made gravity and mass, and then a black hole would have collapsed into a singularity. But no, God, in his infinite wisdom and understanding, he laid a foundation first. And Lord Jesus plainly told us this. If you read the Gospels, how many times did Lord Jesus say to build your house on a rock and not on sand? Well, God built the universe on a rock. He did not build the universe on sand. God built the motion of our reality on a rock. He did not build it on sand. So when a black hole collapses, it collapses to the rock. The rock is foundation. It is below the Planck scale. Below the Planck scale, there is the foundation of the universe. There is the rock, the formless and void foundation. That's what the heavens and the earth were before God created light. They were massless. They had zero mass, zero gravity, zero light. When God created the heavens and the earth, he made the foundation of the universe. And that's the secret to the God equation. That is the secret to the God equation. When God created the heavens and the earth, God did not build his creation on sand. He built his creation on a rock. And foundation, this formless and void structure here, this formless and void property, before light came into existence, is the rock that God built the foundation of the universe upon, which a black hole cannot collapse through. And that concludes this Orion Bible study. I pray this message has blessed you to the nourishment of your soul. In Jesus Christ's most precious name I pray. Amen.